Robbins says that you don't always get your goals, but you always get your standards. If you're miserable in your life, or maybe you feel like you're misaligned, like something's not matching up, it's most likely due to your standards in some way. Now, that doesn't mean that you have the wrong standards. And I'm not talking about the absolute moral standard. I do believe in a moral standard, but I'm talking about your standards, the standard that you set for yourself. And if you are feeling misaligned, it means that you're not either not meeting your standard or you're not stretching your standards. So what exactly do I mean by that? Well, one of the core human needs of the personality is to continue to grow. And one of the biggest keys to happiness, success, fulfillment is it's not more stuff, it's not more accomplishment, it's not hitting all those goals, and it's not hitting that magical point in your life where you hit it, you're there, you've arrived, right? Fulfillment comes from progress, and progress comes from growth. But here's the thing, in order to grow, you have to first raise your standards, and then you have to meet that standard. And if you're not holding yourself to those standards, to those set of rules, you're going to be miserable. But here's the tricky part. If you don't keep raising your standards, you're also going to be miserable. So for example, about a year ago, I weighed around 265 pounds, true story. And I felt terrible. I didn't feel great. I felt unhealthy. And here's the worst part. I couldn't even play with my 2-year-old son. I would run around the house and feel totally winded and worn out by the time I was done with it. And I just thought, this is crazy. Something's got to change. I got to make a shift. And so through that pain of the experience and a lot of different things that was going on at the time, I decided I was not going to be 265 pounds anymore. And so I raised my standards. It wasn't a matter of just hitting the gym with no purpose. It was that I raised my standards. And this really started helping me to cultivate some really powerful habits that helped me lose 90 pounds in less than a year. And this happened when I raised my standards. That's what it all happened because of. And here's the thing, I attached my identity to this new standard because ultimately that's actually what a standard is. It's basically a blueprint for your identity. So once I adopted this new standard, everything started to change. But here's the thing, your identity, once you adopt that new standard, once you have that new level of standard, your identity is going to require you to hold yourself to that standard. Otherwise, you're not going to feel aligned. You're not going to feel fulfilled. And if you start to slip too far back below your standard, you're going to start to have like an identity crisis of sorts. And this can range anywhere from, a minor irritation to a full breakdown. But your identity will hold you to that standard. So for example, the last few weeks, my morning routine is really important to me. It kind of started to drop off. I started to slack, because the 4th of July holiday weekend and, a bunch of other stuff that's going on in the family right now. And I can't even put my finger on exactly why, but somehow it happened. I started to slack. And almost immediately I started to feel off. I started to feel like something wasn't right. But I didn't jump back into the habit immediately like I should have, and slowly other things started to slip, and I got like this snowball effect. I wasn't showing up fully. I wasn't engaged in the creative process, and I started to gain a few pounds, and I realized what is happening, and my brain kind of started freaking out. And I started to analyze it, and I realized that for about 2 weeks, I had not been living up to my own standards for my identity, and it was putting this huge warning flag in my brain. It was just like something is not lining up. Tony Robbins says the strongest force in the human personality is the need to stay consistent with how we define ourselves. So I have this standard that I've been living up to, or up to this point, but I haven't in the last 2 weeks, and this force of my personality is pulling me back. Like you have a standard that you need to live by, and if you don't live by that standard, you're going to be miserable. So let's say that maybe you're in a spot like that. Have you ever had a time when you feel misaligned, like something's off, but you can't really figure out what it is? And then when you do figure it out, you just beat yourself up, and then it creates like this cycle. Have you ever been there? Well, you don't have to do that. in order to get back on track and to either live up to those standards that you've set for yourself, or maybe you haven't raised them, maybe you need to stretch them. There's really 4 steps. The first thing is to acknowledge that it's happened, not with judgment, not by beating yourself up, because that's not going to help, but just get clarity on that it happened, accept that it happened, and then move on to number 2, recommit. Reinforce that this really is your standard and you plan to live by it. You know, we have to reinforce this in our own identity because, again, the standard is the blueprint for our identity. And then in that case, maybe you need to apologize to other people that have been affected, because when our standards start to slip, sometimes it affects the other people around us, right? So reinforce that. The number 3 is make it easy. James Clear talks in his book Atomic Habits that if you want a habit to really stick, you have to make it easy. It has to be something that you want to do. So set yourself up for success by changing your state. Maybe go for a run, go for a walk. Focus on what it actually means, what you're actually trying to accomplish, and then put a meaning to it. Tony Robbins says that the 3 decisions that we're always making is, what do we focus on, what does it mean, and what are we going to do about it? So make it easy. Break that down in your mind, what it means and what that standard is going to mean to you. And then number 4, that goes right into number 4, take action. Do something right now to honor your recommitment. This is going to reinforce in your mind that you're still committed to your standards and you have that strong identity that you're going to actually live up to. Here's the thing. We all slide sometimes. Don't kid yourself that this is never going to happen again, right? We're all human. But we all have standards that we live up to. Now, we either are going to live up to the standards we've set for ourselves, or we're going to feel miserable. But you also have to keep raising that standard in order for you to grow. So I would love for you to do 2 things. First off, just take a look at the last week or the last couple of days of your life and ask yourself, have I lived up to the standards that I've set for myself? And if I haven't, what do I need to do to actually get there? And the second thing is, ask yourself, when was the last time I upgraded my standards? And with that, upgraded my identity. Because if you want to grow, if you want to feel that fulfillment, you have to continually upgrade your standards. And that is how we grow. That's how we move forward. That's how we feel happy. That's how we feel fulfilled. Ultimately, you want to ask yourself the question, is this action bringing me closer to or further away from the person that I want to become? Because what you accomplish, what you gain, all the stuff that you get really is not what matters in the long run. Who you become is the real prize at the end of the journey. Hey, thank you for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you want to dive deeper on how to really build alignment and how to use your past as power to push you forward, I would love for you to join me at my free workshop on Thursdays. Click the link in my bio. Until next time.